Hi everyone, this is Adam Law with Wanderings, and today I'm going to give you a Torah video on the concept of the beautiful captive woman, a very deep explanation of the mystical meaning behind this based on the Ishbitzer and some of my own thoughts and teachings based on other deeper mystical sources. And today actually is a day after the Parsha of Teitzei where it appears. But after discussions with friends over the last few days, I felt that I wanted to bring out this Devar Torah while it was fresh in my mind. And I will be debuting some other Divrei Torah this week too, so hopefully you'll get a chance to see this video. So the Parsha of the Ishus Yafas Torah is one of the most deep and difficult Parshas in the whole Torah. It's the only Parsha which the Gemara says this mitzvah was written about the Yetzer Hara, Keneged HaYetzer Hara, specifically about the Yetzer Hara, which is a very strong thing to say that this mitzvah has some connection and inkling to the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara. So this is what it says. Ki Teitzei lemelchama o oyevcha utzano Adonai Elohecha biyadecha v'shavisa shivyo v'risa v'shivya eshes yafes toar v'chashakta ba l'kakta lecha leisha v'vesa el tok besecha v'gilcha es rosha v'asa es seperneha v'asira es simlas shivya me'aleha v'yashva v'secha v'vachsa es aviha v'es ima yirek yamim v'akakach tavo aleha v'volta v'hayas lecha leisha ואם לא חפצת בה ושילחת לנפשה למחר לו סמכרנו בכסף לא סיסמר בה תחס אשר אניסה. When you will go out to war against your enemies, and Hashem your God will deliver him into your hand, and you will capture its people as captives, and you will see among its captivity a woman who is beautiful of form, and you will desire her, and you will take her for yourself as a wife. You shall bring her in the midst of your house. She shall shave your head and let her nails grow. She shall shave her head and let her nails grow. She shall remove the garment of her captivity from upon herself, and she shall sit in your house, and she shall weep for her father and her mother for a full month. Thereafter you may come to live with her, come to her and live with her, and she shall be a wife to you. And it shall be that if you have not desired her, then you shall send her on her own, but you may not sell her for money, you may not put her to work, because you have afflicted her. A very controversial, interesting part of the Torah. Basically, it's talking about war brides. So one of the ideas that's found, and the reason that it says, the reason this is called Keneged Yetzer Hara, this mitzvah, the only mitzvah in the Torah which the Talmud says is Keneged Yetzer Hara, is because he's saying is that it's the natural way, the natural inclination of men when they go to war to do things like this. So while a lot of people, modern people, would see this mitzvah and say, wow, this is difficult, this is not something that I would agree with, you have to understand that if you look here, there's a very ethical idea going on here about not afflicting this woman who was so afflicted in war. Her family was wiped out, her tribe was wiped out, and your army came and took her as a captive. And it says, treat her well, marry her, bring her in. And it's not saying, toss her aside, don't kill her, don't even work her as a slave, don't sell her, none of these things. It's saying is you've afflicted her. And it's Keneged Yetzer Hara because it's saying is the Yetzer Hara, this desire for sexuality, and the impulses of war, of bloodthirstiness. This is part of man's bestial nature. And this is a way, the bestial nature is what our Yetzer Hara is. It's the part of us that's more animalistic that we have to overcome. But the Torah recognizes there are certain desires that a man has that are not easily overcome. And this is one of the ways to sanctify it. But you can't just sanctify, you can't just go out and decide to marry this woman. There's a process. Not only do you have to treat her right, you have to treat yourself right to make sure this woman, this foreign woman, is somebody that you should bring into the fold. Somebody that really is worthy of your time and attention to bring within Kol Yisrael. Is this going to work out? And that's why you go through this process. One is you have to actually desire her. This isn't like a market where you're going there and choosing among the women and saying, oh, this one might be a good for this, or this one might be good for that. No. It's someone that you feel something deep for, at least physically. But we know that Shucha is a very high spiritual level that, as they say in some circles, you can't negotiate attraction. It's something that you either want or don't want. It says you have to desire her. It says she's beautiful form. That means beautiful to you, right? Because everyone has their own tastes. And then it says bring her into your house. You have to bring her into your inner chamber, not just fantasize about her as an outside being, as something that you see and that you like. But you should go through this process of seeing her as a human being, the way that she really is. When the inflamed passions of war have gone, you need to see her for who actually she is. So it says, shave her head, let her nails grow, remove the beautiful garment that the Sfarim say that she would wear. At the time of war, women would sometimes dress up in these garments so they would not be killed. They dress up beautifully so they would be taken as a war bride, as opposed to being killed. It's a preferable option. And she shall sit in your house and weep, and also crying and weeping makes people very unattractive after a while. At first, you feel some pity, but after a while, it's like, okay, this person's a lot. And after the end of that whole process, a full month, you can decide whether you want to be with her, and you bring her into Klal Yisrael, you Megayer, or you let her go. You don't sell her, you don't use her as a slave, you don't give her to your son. You have afflicted her, you changed her life irrevocably. And so this is a way to take this natural things that men do during war and bring it up to a better way, a more ethical way or spiritual way of doing it. It's interesting because for all the years of man's existence, these inner battles between tribes, these wars really was sort of the standard name of the game. And it seems that women have been uniquely adapted to be able to deal with trauma and move on from a relationship easier and be able to accept and love a man in a more transactional manner here, that they actually can move and become part of this new unit despite the terrible afflictions that happened to them. Because this was built into us as people of all the years of these type of inner war fighting, it seems this is a common thing to do, and women, for one way or another, have adapted and able to do this. That's more for a biological study, and I'm not going to get into that further here. So there's a deep idea talked about in the Sfarim about a question asked is, why did the Jews have to go into Gullus, the concept of the diaspora? We know Eretz Yisrael was promised to us from the very beginning, to Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, and all the Jewish people. And after Pesach, the Yetzias Mitzrayim, everything was given in a way that we should live in Eretz Yisrael. But yet so many of our years we are living here in the diaspora. And we have not gotten our full geula, our full redemption yet. And we've been like this for thousands of years, but even already in the Avos, we see that Avraham, right after he got the land of Eretz Yisrael, he went down to Mitzrayim. And we see Yaakov had to go down to Gullus. That the concept of Gullus is part of the Jewish experience. And some of the deepest, most important parts of Torah, even, and Jewish experience have been learned in the Gullus, in the diaspora. So, the Talmud actually says the Jews did not go into the Gullus, the diaspora, except to bring up converts, to bring up new souls or old souls, to bring back them into the Jewish people, into the fold, to bring that light into the Jewish people. So let's get a little deeper with that concept. Throughout the whole world, there are sparks of holiness that are trapped in the dark shells. And when God created the world, in order that we should make a tikkun, the tikkun olam, we should help Hashem and be partners with God, we bring out these holinesses, these pieces of energy, these godly sparks that are trapped throughout the world when we say a bracha, when we do a mitzvah, wherever in the world we may be. And this might be the secret understanding of the word ger in the Gemara when it says we went into Gullus in order to be megayer, to bring up gerim. These gerim are these sparks which are trapped in the evil, and they are brought to the side of good. When a yid says a bracha or does some other act of holiness, he brings up that spark that was hidden in that dark shell and brings it up into Kedusha. And this, as a matter of fact, is the exact reason the Arizal says that we had to wander the desert for so long. There's nothing harsher and darker than the forces of the desert. That's why the goat to Azazel is brought specifically to the desert in a harsh place. When the Yidden went through the desert, the Ari says that we were learning the doctrine of the sparks, that we were bringing up all the holiness from the evil spirits and sides that you find in the desert. The desert being the symbol of death and evil and harshness. So this concept really is why we go into the Gullus, is to be Megayer, to bring up sparks of holiness throughout the whole world and bring them into Kedusha, whether it's people that were lost or anything, really. Anything can be brought up into Kedusha. So I want to give over a Devar Torah now based on this idea by the Ishbitzer, as well as my own Torah on this after that. It's interesting, though, by the way. Moshe Rabbeinu is considered the tzaddik who led them through the desert. And he is the main character of the Torah, of the 5 books of the Torah, but yet he dies at the end of the Torah, and he doesn't actually get into Eretz Yisrael, which represents the world to come, the next world, the spiritual world. So the reason is for that is because that world is a hidden world that we don't know. And Moshe's job was to bring the sparks of holiness and battle against these forces in this world of affliction, this darkness, this desert, this wandering that Moshe and the people have to do. And whether it's outside enemies like Amalek or inside enemies like Korach, he dies because the next level, Eretz Yisrael, represents the level of the Yid who goes to the next spiritual world. And Moshe, being the soul of all of Israel, we can't see in the Torah what that next world looks like. We only have to know what our work is in this world. The Torah was given for us. Lo b'shamayim, it's given to us to act and do in this world. Okay, so on this concept, let's learn the Torah of the Ishbitzer. Now, we had said there that halachically a person is not allowed to pick an Ishas Yafas Toar, the beautiful woman in captivity. Rather, he has to only eat someone that he has a desire for. And that actually, by the way, is a secret of Shimshon. He goes out and finds these women who he has desire for, and he's megayer them, and he brings them in. However, that can cause great difficulty, as Ishbitzer goes on to say here that the Ben Sor Mora, the reason why it's afterwards, and also the person who's hung, is because there's great difficulties that come with this avoda of bringing the spiritual light that's found in dark places up. There has to be a birur process, a refinement process, and this process is really what he talks about here. So in the first Torah and the first chelik of the Mea Shloach in this parsha, Teitzei, it says, Ki Teitzei l'mochma l'yavcha v'shavisa shivyo. Hainu hadavar tov hanimsa be'uma. He says this captive thing that we find in this war against the war in the world that we're going out for, because Ki Teitzei, you will go out, assuming it's the Diaspora, because it's outside the land of Israel. It's Teitzei, you're going out. You're going to find a good point that's in the nation you're fighting against. Ki b'chol umos nimsa koach tov. Every nation has a good point. Ak kol zman shehi b'nehem hi b'shivya. But this good point really doesn't belong to them. As the Yidden are these spark collectors, these soul collectors, we are the ones who need to bring these good points up to their holiness. And therefore, when it's amongst them, it's considered in captivity, meaning is this good point, this good midah is really belonging to us, but it happens to be in the diaspora, in Shivya, in captivity. But when we bring this good point among us, meaning is this Ishas Yafas Toar, here represents a spiritual good point. Again, it's like a point of light that we're being megayer, we're bringing in. Then it achieves its full level, meaning it's among the umos, the nations, but it really only achieves its highest spiritual level when it's amongst us. An example of that would be, say, like, in America or Canada, we have more, I would say, more laid back midos, easier to get along with in the Middle East, and maybe good customer service. So when these ideas, good customer service, which everyone agrees is a good idea, is brought into Eretz Yisrael among the Jewish people, then it's brought out of captivity and brought up. So this is a good thing why Ingos make Aliyah. They bring that into Eretz Yisrael. They bring their values, and some of their values are inferior, for sure, to the Jewish values of Eretz Yisrael. But some of them are good midos, and those midos can be brought up into Eretz Yisrael, right? It says the tov ha-tova nimsa behem hu ha-tshuka, but the good is called desire. Remember, it said in the parsha that you must desire this Ishas Yafas Toar. So it's the same thing. There's this desire to bring in this level from the umos. Because this good point really is only temporary. The umos, in a way, are a temporary situation. The whole world is really supposed to be connected to the level of Israel, the Geuladik level, the redemption level. So therefore, it's only in a temporary status amongst the nations. They will realize that this really doesn't belong to them. It must be brought up into Kol Yisrael. And again, that's why it's called b'shivya. This tshuka, this desire for holiness, for connection, this good point that you find in them, that really belongs to be brought up in the Kedushas of Israel. Because this level of desire, it's an extremely spiritual level. Think of the Torahs of Rabbi Nachman and the yearning for more, that desire, that wanting to want, the wanting to get better. This is a very spiritual idea. And this idea really isn't shlemus in its complete level in Israel. So the tshuka to bring out this good point really belongs to us. So the spiritual point that's found there really is something that we have connection to. So again, the Ishbitzer here is saying that this good point that's found in them is what's the Ishas Yafas Torah. It's the spiritual point that we need to bring among Klal Yisrael. And when we desire to bring this good point amongst us. That gives it the point, a shlemus, because it's only in a temporary status in the diaspora. So I want to connect to that idea myself and end up with a little Dvar Torah on my own, based on this idea, and that is new ideas. When we're in Galus, all sorts of non-Jewish ideas we come across. Sometimes on different forums of the internet, I find people who are talking about going back to the Jewish ideal, the original Torah, like if we all dress this way and wear a black hat, or follow the Torah when it was 500 years ago, and we're in Gemara like the Yeshiva and Volozhin, everything's going to be okay. But you have to realize at that time, those ideas were also new. And they were based on old ideas, but with new ideas brought in. Meaning is that Torah itself has a spiritual core, but that core, that light goes out, Torah Teitzei Mitzion, it goes up from Eretz Yisrael to the level of the whole world, and then it's refracted and brought back in again. And there's a process of refinement of whether we can bring in the light that was trapped out into the nations, whether we can bring it back in again. Because there's, in this state of being before Geula, things are in Shivya, things are in captivity. So there's these ideas that we find out in the Chutz Haaretz that we have to bring them back in again. And there has to be a process. You have to take off the garments of captivity, grow the hair, grow the nails, and really desire to see. At first, you really desired this idea. You have this great new idea you discovered among the nations, that something that doesn't look like a Jewish wisdom or a Jewish idea or a Jewish thing. But you have to go through this process, this birur, this refinement, to see whether that Kedusha is actually there. And that's what it means, remove the garment of captivity, you remove the klipa of it. You have to go through process and refinement to see whether the idea is deserving to be brought in Klal Yisrael. Example of that, a few examples that come to mind is like Zionism, for instance. At first, there were a lot of people who were really against it, and they had their reasons, which I speak about in the video of Shalach. But over time, we've seen that all it has done is brought great protection, spirituality, and more Torah in the world, and more Kedusha in the world. So for sure, it's seen its test over time, and Eretz Yisrael has only gone up and up and up in every way, physical, spiritual, Torah, everything. So at this point, it would basically, in my opinion, it would basically be not Jewish to be anti-Zionist. Though at some point in Jewish history, when it was unclear, when it was still going through the Birur, the refinement process, there would seem to be strong reasons. Another example I would say, and this is my profession as well, is psychotherapy. Up to about 15 years ago, it was a very unkosher thing to get involved in therapy. Now everybody's doing it. I can't tell you how many from therapists, psychotherapists, psychologists, and stuff there are. Over time, we've seen how beneficial this, even though it was started by Freud and some other Jews, nevertheless, it's a very non-Jewish idea, the idea of psychology, psychiatry. But over time, we have seen how beneficial and good it can be. So it's seen the refinement, the birur over time. So every idea that we come across in the non-Jewish world, before we can bring it into Kedusha, into the halls of holiness in Klal Yisrael, it has to go through this Ishas Yafas Torah process to see whether it's valuable, to see whether it has spiritual value, a birur, refinement. Because at first we're going to have that shukah, we're going to have that desire. Wow, this is awesome, I discovered this amazing new thing, this idea or this practice. But after we have to see over time whether it's worthy of bringing in. We can't move too quickly and we can't move too slowly. There has to be a process of bringing in new light, that holiness and light that's trapped among the nations. And we have to have a process. That's the process of Ishas Yafas Torah. It's my Torah based on the Sfarim, Kadoshim, Ishbitzer, etc. So I know the parsha already passed, but I hope you have a good week. And this is Teitzei, Adam Law, with the concept of the beautiful woman of captivity. Thank you very much. Be well.